The country's secret weapon is that over the past 12 years, more than 2 million American men and women have put on the uniform and gone to war. And they have gone and grappled with truly evil forces. And they are back now in increasing numbers. They're going to change American politics profoundly.
Conservative radio host and MSNBC political analyst, Hugh Hewitt.
Someone needs to step up and articulate that great nations have to be great and that lives have to be lived well and that virtue has to be a part.
People can vote for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. One of those two is going to be the next president, given that they are both presumptive nominees. And everyone ought to focus on that choice because Secretary Clinton, for reasons I can go through if you want to, is disqualified from being the commander-in-chief largely because of her server and her disastrous foreign affairs records.
I cannot believe this country won't turn it around again. There's a generation out there who want very much freedom.
Ladies and gentlemen, nationally syndicated radio host and author, Hugh Hewitt.
Thank you. Thank you, Western Conservative Summit. I hope you're hashtagging out WCS 2016. Following me on Twitter at Hugh Hewitt. I want to thank Jeff Hunt for organizing an extraordinary conference already. He's done an amazing job. He has a great team. Greg Schaller, who I have now been with at debates in Las Vegas and Meet the Press events in Washington, D.C., is an able and extraordinary, as is his wife and daughter. They actually do all the work, I think. And all these young people around Colorado Christian University. And I also note that Jeff did a very classy thing tonight by showing you the John Andrews video. John built this house, and Jeff has expanded it. And both of them working together are extraordinary people, but I want to really pay homage to the person who put this into the mind of John Andrews as something that ought to be done, even as he built Colorado Christian University into this extraordinary institution. And our prayers and our heartfelt thanks are with Senator Bill Armstrong tonight. So please join me in thanking that wonderful man. I've got 25 minutes tonight, so I thought I would tell you about my grandchildren. I'm from the Loretta Lynch Speakers Bureau. Not really. Having done 172 radio interviews of active presidential candidates and been a panelist in 4 presidential debates, I have a few observations. I also have a few Trump tattoos. Would you like to see them? Not one of our 17 candidates was perfect. All of them were better than Hillary Clinton. And one of them has won, fair and square. So I am here at the Western Conservative Summit to help you practice, as I have been teaching people to practice, as the Cavaliers practiced this year. And if you were in a hotel last night, I've been living on the road for a couple of weeks, you might have watched the Believe Land ESPN special, which had to be cut again, the ending of it. They made Believe Land before the greatest comeback in the history of sports playoffs ever, when the Cavaliers beat, what was that other team named? The best team ever to lose the series in the finals. Is that what they are known as? I think that's what they're known as. Dig. And the Cleveland Indians practice, and they've won 14 in a row, which is a series record, a franchise record for them. 14 in a row. They won in 19 innings tonight. That's not a normal baseball game for the Steelers fans in our audience. Most normal baseball games are 9 innings, Greg, and this was 19. And the Browns are practicing. Indeed, I spent all week teaching the Young Conservative Leadership Summit to practice. Where are the Armstrong Fellows? See, we practiced, and I said to them, whenever I say, Armstrong Fellows, you. Now, if any marginally competent speaker is in the audience who is speaking tomorrow, they need only come up here and if their speech is lagging, they need a little energy jolt. They simply look over and say, "Armstrong Fellows." If you practice, you get pretty good at something. What do we have to practice at? We have to practice at Twitter. I really do want to encourage every single person here to start and begin to participate in the online shaping of events that occur in real time. Dan Balls was the first to discover this in his 2012 book, Collision 2012, which he noticed that tweet storms occurring during presidential debates actually determined the winner. Spin rooms were over. So if you're not online tweeting using the hashtag, in this case, pound WCS16, I'm using pound for the benefit of the Steelers fans again, you're not participating fully in the conference. And when you're watching at home, if you're using the hashtag for the debate, whatever is that night, you're in the debate. And it's shaped and it's over, and I want to teach you how to do that. And I want to teach you how to do most effectively the argument that you need this year to carry out of the Western Conservative Summit to your friends and neighbors in Colorado and the Western states, to remind them and to drive home the fact that they got to vote for Donald Trump. Let me tell you why. If you can't make an argument, as I taught my Armstrong Fellows this weekend, if you don't recognize Secretary Clinton's greatest strengths, you cannot puncture them. She is enormously experienced in government. 4 years as Secretary of State, 8 years as First Lady, and that is the job other than president that most prepares you to be president, even more so than vice president. Are you intimately involved in the ongoing dealings of the presidency? I used to tell people that, I always tell people, that when I was a young White House lawyer, I had a Friday staff meeting with counsel to the President, Fred Fielding, about which he had one rule. It could never be interrupted except by the President or Mrs. Reagan. President Reagan never interrupted the meeting, and the meeting was always interrupted. First ladies know what is going on. They are deeply involved in the administrations of their spouse. That is a big credit on Mrs. Clinton's side. So was her time in the Senate, 8 years. She understands fully the institution. She would be quite capable of delivering legislative product. So too was her time as First Lady of Arkansas, especially her work in education reform and in children's health. 10 years is a long time. So was her lawyering. So was her original sponsorship of the Children's Education Fund. So was her extraordinary legal education at Yale, her time on the Watergate Special Prosecutor, her years at Wellesley, at which she excelled. She even had a little walk on the wild side as a Goldwater girl, and then a lot longer walk with Saul Alinsky. But you've got to know these things. She's written 3 best-selling books. She's surrounded by loyalists. She knows how big the government is and how to staff it. She is very experienced. Having said that, though, to your neighbors and to your friends, you're also able to say this. In the 8 years of her time as First Lady, her single biggest legislative attempt was Hillary Care, which makes Obamacare look efficient and effective. She is the grandmother of Obamacare and ought to be credited with all of the ideas which are now raising your deductibles, driving up your premiums, making health care less and less accessible to the poor because while they have theoretical entitlement insurance, they can't find doctors who will see them or treat them. You ought to credit that to her and demand that she own it. You also ought to credit to her, from her time in the White House, an inability actually to keep track of what her president was up to. I need not say any more. Mostly, though, you have to focus on this time as Secretary of State. And I've developed a device. Remember, every good boy deserves fudge. You learn that to learn the scales. E, G, B, D, F. So I offer to you, every liberal really seems so sad. Can you repeat after me? Every liberal really seems so sad. Every liberal really seems so sad. If you can remember that, every liberal really seems so sad, you'll have at your fingertips the ability to make an argument about Hillary Clinton, which is devastating. The first 5 letters of the first 5 words go to her tenure, her vaunted tenure as Secretary of State. Every begins with E, which stands for Egypt, which was a stable and useful ally in the Middle East under Hosni Mubarak for 25 plus years, until the Arab Spring arrived and we deserted our long-standing ally, and Mrs. Clinton sent Frank Wisner, a longtime ambassador whose name may or may be not to you, to reassure Hosni Mubarak of our unrelenting support, only to then undercut Wisner and participate with the president in the overthrow of Hosni Mubarak by the refusal to stand by him under any circumstances, signaling to demonstrators and to the Muslim Brotherhood that they would have their way with that country, and they did. And because of Hillary Clinton and President JV, the Muslim Brotherhood took over that country and was in danger of turning it into another al-Qaeda exporting state, another fast-forward Turkey to full Islamist rule, when President al-Sisi seized power, thank goodness, and restored order away from the one man, one vote, one time forever Muslim Brotherhood. Sharia asserting, Sharia believing Muslim Brotherhood, from which sprang al-Qaeda, from which sprang ISIS. There is a tree, you can see its branches and its leaves, and the tree begins with the Muslim Brotherhood. Egypt, every liberal, L stands for Libya, about which Hillary Clinton said, "We came, we saw, he died." Indeed, we did, and he, Gaddafi, did. And then we left, and we never had a plan, and we died for Americans. And indeed, thousands of people have died. Not only did she abandon Benghazi that night, in a damning and devastating report that she says we ought to move on from, but which Dorothy Woods, widow of Ty Woods, said today, I will not be told to move on from, because I know what happened, and I know who I was lied to, and I know who lied to me. We don't have to move on from it, from Benghazi, nor should we take our eyes away from what Libya has become, a living hellhole, through which 1 million people have passed en route to Libya and Greece, into the refugee crisis that has become Europe's great bane and burden that is tearing Europe apart. Libya is Hillary's. Hillary. They used to say, Lawrence of Arabia, it's Hillary of Libya. And you ought to remember that. She owns it. It's hers. Every liberal. Really. The R stands for Russian reset. She offered up a mangled pool button that had written on it in bad Russian a wrong translation, telegraphing competence right there, of reset. The reset ended up with our withdrawing missile defense from Poland and another ally, and with Russia seizing Crimea after an international propaganda victory at the Sochi Olympics, and an increasing aggressiveness across the world and harassment of our diplomats, including recently reported this week, entering into their homes and killing their pets because Putin wants to send messages. He sends messages every day. He's also deepened his involvement in Syria. He is back in the Middle East with the Russians for the first time since they were exited out of the Middle East in 1972 under Sadat. Losing under President Luz and Secretary of State Luz, American initiative in the Middle East, leadership. Every liberal really seems, the first S is sadly for Syria, where the dictator Assad received high praise from Hillary Clinton, and then a hands-off approach as he began to commit genocide on his people, a genocide that's killed 500,000 people and caused more than 1 million people to flee that country. Again, refugees amidst whom are terrorists, but mostly just miserable people, forced from their country by barrel bombs and chemical weapons, red lines that were not enforced in a plan and a plot planned out by Secretary of State Clinton and her crackerjack team of aces at the Secretary of State Department. Every liberal really seems so sad. The last S on the foreign policy side is the Status of Forces Agreement, which was originally negotiated by President Bush to expire in December of 2011, but also with the intention that it be extended by the new president as circumstances required on the ground. It's up to the Department of State to negotiate such an agreement in consultation with the president. That means it was on Hillary. No such negotiation was concluded. The Iraqis, being good negotiators, they expected counteroffers. They never got one. We, by the way, now have more than 4,000 troops in Iraq without a Status of Forces Agreement, But because of the failure of Hillary Clinton, President Obama had an excuse and indeed did peremptorily withdraw 10,000 troops from Iraq in December of 2011, leading to the collapse of half of that country and the expansion of ISIS from Syria into Iraq, so that it became the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. President Obama, otherwise known as President JV, refers to it as ISIL, but the rest of the world says the Islamic State or ISIS. He doesn't want to even conform to the reality of the world's usage. His 6-word legacy, by the way, he's not on the ballot, but his 6-word legacy is leading from behind, red line, JV. That's it, 6 words. Leading from behind, red line, JV. The worst president of modern times. I don't dislike him. I don't dislike him, he is simply that bad. Every liberal really seems so sad. So I've told you about Egypt, about Libya, about Russia, about Syria, about the status of force of the agreement. What are the last 2 S's about? Those are domestic. The first one is Supreme Court. And not just Supreme Court, but the 66 other judicial vacancies which will be filled on day 1 by nominees of a new president. 67 judges will issue approximately 30,000 rulings over the course of their career. The rulings that come with the name of a Supreme Court justice on them will affect your religious liberty, your First Amendment rights, your Second Amendment rights, the balance of power between federal and state. We cannot allow Hillary Clinton, because we know that she will appoint hard left judges who will destroy the Constitution as originally intended, as Eric McTaxas talked about. If you can keep it, if you elect Hillary Clinton, you are not keeping it. You are giving it away. Supreme Court. And then finally, the server. I want to finish by talking about the server because it's misunderstood and the media doesn't get it. I had a conversation today with Glenn Thrush, and I'd urge all of you to go to hughhewitt.com and read it, because Glenn's a very good reporter for Politico.com who does not understand what the server is. It isn't just a complete package of lies by the former Secretary of State. It is that. It isn't just emails that embarrass her and implicate the Clinton Foundation in wrongdoing, though it is that. It isn't just obstruction of justice, which it is, because she erased 33,000 of them, some of which were clearly government. We've learned that. It isn't just a violation of 18 U.S.C. 1924, which it clearly is, the inappropriate storage of classified materials. It doesn't matter what things were marked or not marked. None of that matters. It is clearly a violation of law. What matters is it compromised our national security. I asked former Deputy Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, Mike Morrell, who was also acting director of the CIA, in an extensive interview a year ago, which is also online, what did he think of the server? Bad judgment. We know that our enemies have the capability to go after every unencrypted system. And so, and I'm paraphrasing here, you can look it up except for the last word. So you are saying the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians have everything on her server? To which he answered, yep, they have everything. Now, let me ask you, for those of you who use electronics, imagine that every iPad you own, every cell phone you've got, every computer you've sat down at, if you sent and received emails, direct messages, texts from those, if I took the last 5 years of those, of yours, everyone that came in and everyone that went out, and I gave them to your worst enemy, your worst enemies, name 3 or 4 or 5, how would you feel about your life? Would it be compromised? Would you be vulnerable? If you begin to think about the data set that our enemies have compiled upon would-be President Clinton, and not just would-be President Clinton, but everyone in communication with her, including President Obama, all the cabinet secretaries. I asked David Axelrod on CNN, did you know about the server? He told me no. I asked former Chief of Staff William Daley on the set of Meet the Press, were you aware of the server? He was flummoxed by the question, and he said, no one was. Nobody knew they were sending anything to an unencrypted private homebrew server, which is like sending it directly to Moscow. So everybody who did that has a file open on them in all of our hostile intelligence agencies' databanks. My first job in the United States government out after the courts, D.C. Circuit, was as the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Special Assistant for Attorney General Smith and then for Attorney General Meese. We knew about every spy in the United States that we could find, and we spied on them. And we developed dossiers on them, and we would go to the court, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, and get those warrants authorized. The Russians don't authorize warrants, they just take everything. And they use it. They use the vulnerabilities. Do you have a child with a drug problem? Have you got a money problem? Is there an affair going on here? What information can they adduce from what you do not know? Can they plant bugs in her system that travel with her emails? Yes, 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 yes. It's a nightmare. It compromises her effectiveness. She is disqualified. Marco Rubio used to use that word in the debates. I don't think he ever explained it. By disqualified, meaning she would be dangerous to everyone in this room, even if she doesn't know it, even if she knows it and won't admit it, we know it. And to this certainty, a senior-ranking former CIA member whose name you would all recognize, but who said it to me off the record, but it confirms what Deputy Director Morell told me on the record. It would be intelligence malpractice if they did not have everything on that server. I believe she will be indicted because she ought to be indicted. Whether or not Loretta Lynch does that, though, doesn't affect our duty. Our duty, to quote another former First Lady, is to just say no. Again and again and again. So in conclusion, let me say, Colorado is a difficult state. Very hard state. It's purple state tending to blue. It's been red in the past. It can be red in the future if we talk about opportunity, and there are great shifts in American politics going along. Both candidates have flaws. This is the first time we've had a presidential campaign. All presidential candidates have flaws. They are usually exposed during office. For the first time ever, we've had candidates whose flaws are fully known. That makes for an interesting election with high negatives for both candidates. But we have to make a choice. It's binary. And I argue, especially to those people of faith in the audience, that every man and woman serving in uniform at the tip of the spear or far in the end, if they go in harm's way, deserve the better of the two, who will be, one of them, the commander-in-chief. One of them will be commander-in-chief. So I thank all of you who are service members. And if we have any parents of military, would you stand up? Parents of military? Thank you. Special burden on parents of military. We owe those parents and their children the best commander-in-chief. It cannot be Hillary. We will lose, and the awful toll of the last 6 months, which is familiar but sad, and underway again tonight, you may not know that a terrorist attack is underway in Bangladesh tonight, in the European center of the city, a hostage situation by an Al-Qaeda affiliate, which means now it's San Bernardino and Paris, Brussels and Orlando, Istanbul and Bangladesh, 6 in 6 months. That's not stopping because of President JV, because of the red line that wasn't enforced, because of leading from behind in Libya. That's going to get worse. It's going to accelerate. It could come into this hall tonight. We don't know. But I tell you this, it isn't going to get fixed under Hillary. So I think our duty is clear, our obligations are obvious, and I hope your energy is high and you've got a smile on your face and you got the Armstrong fellows to show you the way. God bless and thank you, Colorado.